If you've played a lot of JRPGs like I have, chances are there's some games that are just, I don't know, you can't not play them, even if you don't like them. Some games are classic games that we love. Other games genuinely surprise you. And there are some that people just can't stop complaining about online. These are the ones that spark all the arguments, people get roasted over, but somehow people keep talking about them and playing them and enjoying them anyway. The stories might be messy, the combat might frustrate you, but you can't ignore these games. And that's exactly why they're so fun to hate or so fun to talk about, even if you don't like them. So today we're talking about a couple of JRPGs that, at least in my experience, I've seen a lot of people love to hate them. Do I hate some of these games on this video today? Not really. I really don't hate any game. It's fun to dislike them and talk about them and stuff. But you know what? This is going to be an interesting video to show you guys. I'm interested to have some discussions with you as well. So before we get to that, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts down below. And I'm sorry, I don't really have an office right now, so I'm making the absolute most of what I have. So let's get to number one in today's video. Here we go. Final Fantasy XIII is probably the most famous love-to-hate JRPG out there, and it's for good reason. The linearity overall is brutal, and it's kind of funny because you spend so many hours walking down corridors with not really any freedom to explore, which is a huge departure from the more open kind of exploration vibe that Final Fantasy fans expect. Combat is pretty deep on paper thanks to the paradigm system, but once you learn it, fights start to just feel like clockwork, I guess. And the story, I would say, it's kind of over-the-top melodrama meets cutscenes, non-stop cutscenes. I mean, it's easy to see why so many people just kind of dislike this one online. So Final Fantasy XIII feels like it was designed to test your patience. There is a weird charm about it. I wouldn't say that I absolutely hate this game. I would say that it's probably one of my least favorite Final Fantasies. The visuals, yes, they're great. The cinematic sequences were really great at that time, and they did do a good job at making me feel like I'm inside of a movie, more or less. I mean, this was the first game from Final Fantasy on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, so it was a bit of a landmark title at the time. Yes, it is frustrating. It's also beautiful though, and it's strangely compelling all at once. So I would say it's a perfect storm, pardon the pun, with lightning being the main character, for the love-hate discussion. Next up is a game that I am still wondering what the heck it was, and that's Kingdom Hearts 3. This game had a nearly impossible job, wrap up a story that fans had waited so long to see resolved. And it's no surprise that some of you felt overwhelmed by the convoluted plot and story threads that jumped between all the worlds and all the original characters. It is incredibly confusing, and a lot of the story beats just went right over my head. And it's unfortunate because some people would argue that you have to play every single entry to understand pretty much every moment in the game. And aside from that, if we're being honest, the gameplay is great. Kingdom Hearts gameplay is known for being super fluid and flashy and satisfying. It gives you a reason to move forward even when the story is going to test your patience. And beyond the gameplay, Kingdom Hearts 3 shines in the attention to detail. I love the Disney worlds. The Toy Story one was my favorite. I love the callback to Final Fantasy Versus 13 as well. So if you know the lore behind that, that was a really great Easter egg for fans of that. The plot is frustrating, but the adventure itself is hard to hate. It's the kind of game that is going to spark debate about story versus gameplay, what worked, what didn't work, while keeping you glued to the screen. So there is a classic mix of frustration and enjoyment. And that's exactly why it earns a spot on the list here for me. Chrono Cross, it's one of my, I wouldn't say favorite games, but it's a game that I've come to appreciate over time. It's a game that people genuinely either adore or you kind of scratch your head at. And after 20 hours of my first playthrough, I genuinely was wondering what the heck I was doing. But over time, I've just kind of come to enjoy it and meet it where it's at. The music is amazing. It's probably one of the best soundtracks on the PlayStation era for JRPGs. And visually, it was doing a lot of heavy lifting on the PlayStation 1, so it's incredibly beautiful. But the story is super complex. The plot threads don't connect clearly. And there's a huge cast of characters that can feel incredibly overwhelming to even try and approach collecting. A lot of you guys out there love the narrative ambition, multiple endings, while some of you might find it frustratingly abstract or confusing. I mean, the debates have kept Chrono Cross alive in conversations for over 20 years now. But what makes it so special is that underneath all of that narrative confusion lies some pretty smart and engaging gameplay. And this is something that I actually did really dislike at first. It's not your typical turn-based game, there is a lot more strategy using your environments and the elements. I mean, it's something I'm not going to get into in today's video because simply I don't feel like spending 10 minutes breaking down the battle system, but it is pretty involved. And again, look, the soundtrack is going to be the most memorable thing. And look, overall, even if the story sometimes feels messy, the world itself is pretty mesmerizing. Even if you can appreciate the artistry and the depth that's happening with Chrono Cross, I'm sure you can forgive the rough edges here. So it's a game that's going to stick with you both because of what it did really well and because of the debates that it's going to inspire. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is probably the most hated game on this list, and it's a game that I don't really hate, it's just one that I don't fully enjoy, but some people are very passionate about it to the point that when I actually included it in a video last year, believe me, the amount of negative discourse that I personally received was unbelievable. Some moments in this game are lighthearted and goofy, while others are very emotionally heavy and can feel a little bit jarring. The dialogue here definitely leans into more of the anime trope. It's going to turn some players off, and not even just dialogue that leans into anime stuff, but some of the character designs, it can feel a bit over the top. But the world building is nothing short of spectacular. It's a bit of a different approach to the Xenoblade Chronicles vibe if you have played number 1. And yes, it is more of a shift, especially with combat as well. I know some of you guys really dislike the combat, the way that is, again, different from Xenoblade Chronicles 1. It's just hard to get my head around personally. So the one thing that I do remember disliking a lot about this game, and forgive me if I get some details wrong here, but if you played the game, I'm sure you'll remember, it's where you have to level up some of your units or your drivers to have high enough skill points or something within their skill tree to allow you to proceed through some of the environments. It is incredibly annoying, and it's one thing that I really didn't feel like was necessary, especially when it's kind of grouped in as a side quest. It becomes less of a side quest and more of a mandatory thing in order for you to proceed through these environments and progress the story. So that was one thing that I remember really not liking. It's a game that's going to leave your head spinning, whether or not you loved it or hated it. And I know a lot of people I would consider maybe more of a vocal minority or basically everybody loved to hate this game when it first came out, and people still do now. So that's it for Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I don't hate it, but I understand why people do. Now, hang on before we get any further. I also wanted to let you know that almost 90% of the people that watch my channel on the regular are not subscribed. So if you like these kind of videos and you want more content every week in your YouTube subscription feed, I would love to have you. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and also I would love to know your comments on today's video as well. Anyway, more video right now. Bravely Default 2 is a game that I really wanted to love, and I really did. And I know a lot of you might like the game, but some of you may have found the same exact thing as me. The early hours are great. You've got that classic JRPG feel. The job system starts opening up, and it feels like you're about to settle into something that's pretty satisfying. But for me, right after the initial chapter or a couple hours in, the game's difficulty just spikes pretty hard. I went from feeling pretty confident and comfortable to suddenly getting wiped by enemies and even just like the initial bosses that felt really stronger than anything I'd been dealing with up until that point. And it wasn't the kind of difficulty that made me want to push through. It was the kind that made me think, what am I missing here? Because it didn't feel like I was playing the game badly necessarily. It felt like the game suddenly expected me to grind or completely rework my setup just to stand a chance. And that's where I started to lose momentum. So instead of experimenting with the job system that I know a lot of you love, and I've come to appreciate job systems in JRPGs over the years, so I probably should revisit this one. I really felt like I was being pushed into specific strategies just to survive or even just try and stand a chance. And this is where I dipped out of the game. I mean, not because the game is bad, because I genuinely don't think it is. It's because it stopped being fun for me. I didn't feel that pull to go level grind just to get past the initial wall. I mean, I wasn't even like 5 to 10 hours in the game, I think. And that's where a lot of the frustration around this game comes from for me, and maybe you too. So if you're into that trial and error, build optimizing style, yes, you'll probably get a lot out of it. But if you're just trying to enjoy the ride, that early difficulty spike really killed the momentum for me. So that's my take on Bravely Default 2. I'd be interested to know if you agree. Now, I really struggled with which game to include from the Pokemon series here. Either go Sword and Shield or go Scarlet and Violet. I'm going to pick Sword and Shield here because, while Scarlet and Violet was incredibly glitchy and buggy, but overall, I think it was a okay experience. And especially if you're playing now on Switch 2, it's more tolerable. But Sword and Shield, I think, is the more divisive title because from the National Dex controversy to the graphical criticisms, at least of that game, I think there was a lot to complain about here. It was a game that I was playing and I just could not wait for it to be over. I know some of the mechanics in here were interesting enough, like the Gigantamaxing, but I think that was the point, in at least my personal Pokemon journey, where the whole experience started to feel really stale. The online debates at that time were pretty intense and the backlash was pretty loud, making it a great example of a polarizing game because everybody seemed to have an opinion about it. And I think this was the first example of cut corners because a lot of people expected more of a big leap since this was the first mainline Pokemon game on the Switch. But instead, we were a little bit disappointed with the visuals, with the animations, and overall the world design didn't match that expectation. So reused animations or more dull or simple environments, again, became really easy targets that snowballed in terms of criticism pretty quickly. And look, this is the thing with Pokemon. We expect a lot more than what we've been delivered, and it's unfortunate that a franchise that makes as much money as we think it does tends to cut corners. Why is that? The Pokemon Sword and Shield is going to be one that I always remember as much as I try and love it, there's always going to be some things that I think kind of poorly on. Next up is The Last Story. Now, this is a game that I didn't play when it launched, and I was looking for something to enjoy after finishing Lost Odyssey. Of course, you guys know I'm a Final Fantasy fan. I like Hironobu Sakaguchi, I like Nobuo Uematsu, so I want to try and play some of the games that they've touched. But oh my goodness, this game was such a boring letdown, and I hate to be super negative about something, but I'm telling you, I really struggled to get into this one. The pacing really dragged, story moments felt really uneven, and combat was just completely weird. It was like an MMO-style combat where everything was automated. I really didn't feel like I had much choice in the battle system as to what happened, or at least having as much control over it as I would have loved. And aside from the battle system being like real-time action with cover mechanics and more command-based stuff, the camera also was kind of awkward, and some mechanics I don't think were really explained super clearly. So instead of being what could have been innovative, it really felt clunky. And again, the story and the characters, it was another mixed bag for me. It leans into a romantic narrative, which some people do enjoy, but for me, it just felt really predictable and just did not interest me as much as I wish it did. Compared to some more bigger JRPG epics, I mean, the scale is a lot smaller here, which can make it feel less impactful if you're expecting something huge and sweeping, considering the reputation that this game has. I mean, this is one of the allegedly the best JRPGs on the Wii, so to finally play it all these years later, I felt like it was a disappointment. So I'm sure there's a lot of you guys out there who know that there's a lot of heart in this story, or you might be charmed by the world and the characters, and I don't know, it just felt like a really watered down JRPG to me. And I'm sorry if you don't agree with me, but this is just where I'm at for The Last Story. Let's move on to another Final Fantasy game, which is the most recent modern entry in the Final Fantasy series. So Final Fantasy XVI is a game that people cannot stop talking about whether they love it or hate it. The action combat is super fast and incredibly satisfying in my opinion, but it definitely alienates purists who were expecting a more traditional turn-based JRPG. The story is super political. It's really just got a grand scale vibe about it, which sparks debate even whether or not it feels like Final Fantasy. There's some classic things in there like the crystals. The crystals make a return thematically. And overall, it's just got a mature theme to it that I really loved. Honestly, it's got a much darker tone. And a lot of other people, in my experience, have argued that it's too cinematic and it loses the charm of the earlier entries. I personally loved this game, but I know a lot of people dislike this one. The thing is, it's hard to ignore how good it can feel when it does click. The world building, in my opinion, is great. The realms are massive, and yes, it is kind of linear like Final Fantasy XIII as well, but it just felt a little bit more alive in a way that just really suited this game and suited the world. There was so much lore, and it was brought to life incredibly well with the insanely great voice acting. The music is okay. I don't love the music in this game, but I think it did a really great job at painting the picture of the story underneath all of the dialogue and all of the, the world building that's present within the game. And it's very cinematic. The combat loop rewards skill and strategy, even if players complain. I mean, people, I would argue, are maybe not coming back straight away, but I think over time might revisit this game with more of an open mind. I know it was poorly received on release, but I think over time, people might slowly start to love this one a little bit more than hate. Okay, so next up, I'm finally going to talk about Fire Emblem, and it's a game that I know some people dislike, and it's a game that I personally had to drop off because I felt that it was a little bit underwhelming, at least after maybe 10 or so hours. I love the gameplay in Fire Emblem games, but something about this story and something about the world just didn't stick, and that's Fire Emblem Engage. I feel like at least over the years since Fire Emblem Engage was released, it's one of those games where the conversation around it almost overshadows the game itself, especially coming off Fire Emblem Three Houses. Expectations were super sky high for another deep character-driven story, but Engage goes in a completely different direction. It's a lot more bright and more straightforward in tone, and it's very much a classic good versus evil vibe, which immediately might rub you the wrong way. Add in some of the dialogue that can feel a bit one note, and characters don't always have the same depth that you're looking for with a really classic kind of Fire Emblem deal. And it's not that the story is awful, it just feels like a step back compared to what came before, and that contrast is kind of why I'm including it in this video. And then there's the ring system, which is a really cool idea, but it's also very divisive. I mean, bringing back legacy characters like Marth and Ike as summonable allies is great from a gameplay perspective. There's, flashy abilities and a lot of build variety, but for some of you, and maybe even me included, it kind of feels like it leans a bit too hard on nostalgia. Almost like the old heroes are doing all the heavy lifting again while the new cast kind of struggles to stand out. So it can make the world feel less grounded, especially when compared to the more serious tone of, again, the game that came right before it. But here's the thing, when you sit down and play it, Fire Emblem Engage is good from a gameplay standpoint. The combat is pretty tight, but it's a game that you're going to argue about while still playing the heck out of it, honestly. So it's one that I want to rebuy and replay just for the sake of having some Fire Emblem challenge. And look, nothing wrong with a bit of nostalgia, but I just wanted something a little bit more from the story. And last on the list today is Final Fantasy VIII, the controversial classic. And look, I've made a couple videos on Final Fantasy VIII before, and if you were around when Final Fantasy VIII came out, you might have thought it was really cool. It was quite a contrast shift from Final Fantasy VII, but it's one of the games that divides fans in the Final Fantasy franchise like no other. Some love it for the storytelling and the unique systems that are present within the game, while a lot of you groan at a lot of the quirks that make it memorable. The junction system, for example, letting you customize magic and stats in a way that's pretty deep, but it does feel confusing or overcomplicated to some players expecting a more traditional approach. And let's not even talk about the level scaling as well, because that's a whole other mixed bag that just makes the game breakable in a way with the built-in card game Triple Triad. So that's for a whole other video, because I did make another video on that, talking about why the hate, why is Final Fantasy VIII so hated. And yes, we could talk about the story as well. It's dramatic, romantic, and occasionally a little bit over the top. Some people love the character-driven focus, while other people think that Squall is one of the most brooding protagonists in the series. But there's a lot to love beneath the controversy. I know it's not a perfect game. The music is so good. The environments are really beautifully varied and beautifully done for the PlayStation 1, and the cinematic sequences really make you feel like you're living inside that world. One of the clear highlights in the experience for me. And the combat rewards strategy once you understand the junction system. Yes, I know it takes a little bit to actually get there, and the game does take risks in many ways that other Final Fantasy entries did not. So Final Fantasy VIII might frustrate you at times, but it's impossible to forget, and that's exactly why a lot of people are still debating it all these years later. So there's my JRPGs that a lot of you guys love to hate. Do I hate any of these games on this video today? Not really. There's some that I just kind of think are lesser experiences for me personally, but I don't truly hate anything. But compared to some of you guys online, I know Xenoblade Chronicles is like a no-go for some of you. So anyway, there's the video today. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know games that you maybe just outright hate or dislike. I'd be interested to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching today, and thank you for bearing with my makeshift office here. We'll see you in another video next week. Bye-bye.